And that's just about all there was in those little cubicles in the check room, was guns and knives. But that was relatively uneventful. I didn't get into any problems, didn't get beat up or anything, and that stopped, and then we were off. In what was we called our search for Amelia Earhart. Of course, Amelia Earhart had disappeared quite some time before, but the general idea was she disappeared somewhere in around Guam, Tinian, Saipan, whatever. And so they decided we would look. Once again, we had all this high-toned camera equipment, and of course, all we were really doing was sailing around, taking pictures of the Japanese military installations around there. Stay at Guam was pretty standard. Foreshore, it went, and then on back to the Hawaii, and then home. Well, it was pretty. We did not spend an awful lot of time in our home port, which was Long Beach. We did get back to Long Beach. We went to Bremerton for overhaul, which is another story. Bremerton, of course, was pretty nice for me because on a weekend I could get down to Portland. One of my jobs was boat crew. I was never a coxswain, just bow hook, stern hook. Interesting thing about the boat crews, we had a young man on the ship early on. I think his name was Holman. Small, wiry, and one of the very few people who was actually heavier than water. Never could swim because he'd sink. He couldn't stay afloat. Never passed the swimming test, but he still managed to make it aboard ship, and he'd still be a member of the boat crew. One of the times, I don't know if he was a coxswain, I wasn't there at the time, but the story was pretty sure to be true. He was bow hooked and hanging on to the bow line as the coxswain backed out of the slip in Long Beach, and he was looking at one of the seagulls, one of the gals there on the landing, apparently a pretty good looking broad, and while he's watching her, he's holding onto the line and walking, looking backwards. He walked right off the end of the pier. He went right straight down. Luckily, he had a hold of that line still, and he just climbed on up the line and made it back aboard the boat. He got out before the war started. He never did come back in, as far as I know. But there could not an awful lot of stories to be told as far as the boat's concerned. I was a member of the boat crew off and on at different times. Oh, one of the jobs that I especially liked was mess cook. I was mess cook when I left the boat. I went to mess cooking, and we had the family style mess, and it was pretty standard that the mess cook got tips every payday. Seaman first, a buck. Seaman first and above. So a buck a payday at the mess cook. Seaman dues through 50 cents to the mess cook. I saw to it that if we had ice cream, they had extra ice cream. I saw to it that what was extra butter. If they went down to when came time to go down the ice machines for breakout, go down there and steal butter and whatever was necessary. On payday, we had ice cream, whether it was on the menu or not. I'd buy it at the Geduck stand. And my tips were good. Once in a while, I'd bring back a half a pint of whiskey or something for the cooks in the galley. And if everybody got a drink, I got seconds whenever I wanted them. I was a darn good mess cook, and I got well paid. Shipped over mess cook and did my 3 months chore duty, and then I shipped over for a second 3 months chore duty. By then, Poole was today's bosun mate, and I wanted to ship over for another 3 months chore duty, but he wouldn't let me. And he put me on side cleaning. Red, what's his face, don't remember offhand, was chief side cleaner. There's another one. I spent 6 months side cleaning, loved it. Worked hard, but got every night liberty. And this was pretty good deal. I worked with Henningsman mostly, and we got pretty efficient at our job. We could get an awful lot done in less time than the average person. And of course at sea, we'd up in the silo and did whatever was necessary. And like I said, six months of that, I enjoyed it. But then one day, Poole asked Ward if we could have Henningsman and I back on deck for an afternoon. And Ward said, well, it's up to them if they want to go. Well, we didn't give a hoot. We weren't doing anything much anyway. So we went back on deck, and Poole was laid out the work he wanted us to do. And Henningsman said, is that all? Is that all you're interested in? Poole said, yep, that's it. And so we went ahead and got the work done, got it over with, and went back up to the silo. It took maybe an hour and a half, and that kind of, Poole says, that takes care of that. So next quarter, we're going back on deck. Well, that didn't appeal to me. I didn't particularly want to work for Poole. But I had talked to Isham earlier about going into the turret, which didn't appeal to me all that much. Of course, Abbott had, my friend Abbott had gone into the turret, and which interested me, but I didn't want to go back on deck for Poole, so I asked Isham if I could still get in the turret. And he said, okay. Well, the next thing you know, I'd made third class. It was Fuquay was the turret captain. He made us study. That was part of our job, was to study and prepare for advancement and rate. And he was probably about as good a boss as I ever had in the Navy, was Fuquay, and definitely one of the smartest. In any event, the next thing you know, I'm a third class gunner's mate, and go by as cast. That's pretty much where I stayed around, I'm sure you've heard about all the stories you need about the Astoria's battles. Actually, I was transferred in July, and sent back to new construction, which isn't exactly what I got, but I was transferred in July. I did not actually a survivor, just an ex-Astoria swabby. Interesting thing, I was in the 1.1 battery when I left, and Snook had worked with me for quite a bit. Was the 1.1 magazines. It was one of the jobs that I had was taking care of the 1.1 magazines. Well, the 1.1 magazines, they were down below a lower powder handling ring, and there had been some talk about putting an escape hatch in there, but they decided that was going to cost too much money. And we were in the Navy Yard in Mare Island. So they didn't put an escape hatch. So when the general quarters sounded, went down to the 1.1 magazine, and the hatch was closed and dogged down from above with no escape hatch. Snook and his crew went down with the ship. Nobody ever let him out of the 1.1 magazine. I was, being a teacher, I was an instructor at Bargain Naval Proving Ground later on in 44, and Gunner Larson, who had his leg gimped up when the Battle of Sable, happened to be serving the Naval Proving Ground at the same time, and I was talking to him about it. He said it was just a case of confusion, that he fully believed that if people had not been, if there hadn't been so much confusion, that they could have got Snook and the other 1.1 ammunition handlers out of the 1.1 handling room. Magazines, who knows? They might have been dead anyway. But this was Gunner Larson's idea, that quite possibly that Snook and his boys could have been rescued. Not a happy thought. That was one of my battle stations before being transferred. The other one was the machine gun control aft. 20 millimeter. Well, yeah, and that was wiped out, is my understanding, except for one man. One side was wiped out, and this one guy went over, sort of a supernumerary, went over to see if he could help, and while he was, had done so, the other side was wiped out. That fairly well covers my Astoria reminiscences. I was gone. I did happen to be in the Bay Area when the Astoria survivors came in. I was living in Oakland at the time, and I was crossing over, took the train over. I was going to visit with a friend and have dinner with him and his wife, and I think it was in the station that I ran across some Astoria survivors. As a result, I called up my friend and canceled our dinner, and every place we went that night, we ran into Astoria survivors. Red Whiting ended up spending the night at our place, and we had quite a ball, and it got to be a pretty darn drunken evening before it was over with. Mommy just reminded me that nowhere in this little dissertation did I say anything about being married. She and I were married while the ship was in Mare Island for overhaul in 1941. And it does pertain to the Astoria because she was kind of planning on coming over to Hawaii while we were Hawaiian detachment over there. And I had agreed to extend my enlistment in order to get new construction and go back to the mainland. And then the war happened and she couldn't come to Hawaii, and my new construction transfer was canceled, at least until July of '42. She was along. We were going to dinner at the Williams place in San Francisco the night of the Astoria survivors came through. A couple of other little things probably should be mentioned. A couple of little stories. Poole, the bosun mate, was always barefoot. Some of the time, even while he was on liberty, always wore his hat on the back of his head with his bald head shining. And he was in the F Division bosun mate, and he'd walk across the quarterdeck barefoot, hat on the back of his head. And one day, Lieutenant Teasdale stopped him and said, "Poole, square your hat." And so Poole squared his hat and went along. Come back a little bit later, Teasdale said, "Poole, square your hat." So he squared his hat and went on his way. Came by a little bit later, and he had his hat on the back of his head again. Teasdale called him over, and he said, "Poole, come over here." And he says, "Stand there at attention." And he stood there, and he says, first he said, "Square your hat." And Poole squared his hat. He says, "Now I want you to stand there at attention until I tell you you can leave." Poole said, "Mr. Teasdale, I'm a busy man. I don't have time to play games." And he tipped his hat on the back of his head and went on about his business. And he got away with it. Another time he was arguing with Isham about the boat crew. And this was I believe this was the Pilling whaleboat crew. And Isham had put a pretty big man as coxswain for the boat. And Poole says, "Mr. Isham, you don't want a big man up there in the bow." Call him Stroke. He said, "You want a small man up there. If you want big man, you want big man on the oars." And Isham says, "Well, I guess it does sound a little bit unorthodox." Poole said, "Unorthodox, hell, it just ain't done." Another little sidelight of this that probably should be added is the brother of the cousin that was aboard the Astoria when I reported aboard, also joined the Navy. And he asked to come aboard the Astoria because I was in the Astoria. Myron Colton became sort of Mule Junior, and I kind of took him under my wing. He was went in the supply department, and Baker Stryker, and then Baker, fine young man, a nice kid. And he did not make it out. He was one of those that was killed when the Astoria went down. And it was one of those things. Barney says, say something about liberty, say something about Tonga. Well, what can I say? Liberty ports are like women. They're all good, some just better. I'd say probably my favorite Liberty port still has to be Portland, Oregon that is, and my least favorite would be Norfolk, Virginia. I'm sure you have a lot of people talk about Tonga. I don't know how many of them had been to the hidden village out in the jungle where the Nuku'alofa people had moved to when they got so scared that the Chapans were going to invade them. It was pretty hard to find, very difficult to see the road that left from the main road and went out into the boondocks. Well, pretty much like we had in the old days back there. I met a young man who took me out there and also told me a few things about the Tongan history and so on. He was went to college in New Zealand, and he was quite well educated, but he still talked with pretty much of an accent. His name was James something, only it came out more like James when he said it. He taught me a little bit, as I said, about the Tonga history and the language, which is very closely related to the Hawaiians. They were settled by the Tahitians, just like the Hawaiian Islands were. When the Tahitians came in, the people that were living there were black, and they got rid of them. They killed all of them off and took over the islands. The thing that I guess probably the most striking similarities to it would be Tahini instead of Wahine. Well, Tapini sister, Tahini woman. Aloha, they say Aloha, which means I go, and the answer to that would be no fua, I stay. So you've got two ways of saying goodbye. I was particularly liked their way of saying good morning and good afternoon. Good morning, Mololaleke Pangi Pangini, and good afternoon, Mololaleke Afaini. And they tells me that probably the literal translation to that would be something like, I wish you a pleasant day this morning or this afternoon. I kind of like that. The rest taught me a lot of different words and expressions which I have forgotten. Anyway, I spent all my liberty time out there, and when we left, before we got underway, they gave me some presents, which included a big tablecloth all painted up with their natural dyes and so on. And I have no idea in the world whatever happened to that sucker. We've already been told about the kava, and how they spiced it up for the Americans and others of our ilk, put a little bit of orange juice in it and let it ferment. And we call that kava nolte, nolte being orange, the fruit, not necessarily the color. The orange fruit never did turn orange, it stayed green on the outside. Orange on the inside, green on the outside. The kava must have had some kind of a drug in it, because it kind of made your lips feel dead after you drank a little bit of it. And I don't know if I can think of anything else to add before this tape runs out, I'll do that. But I think that pretty well covers my reminiscences. Oh yeah, one more little anecdote that I thought was kind of funny. But anytime the provision ship, somebody stole some goodies to bring up to the various battle stations and watch stations. And in our case, it had somebody had stolen a stick of bologna, a good sized stick of bologna, and they knew the doctor was wandering around, and so they put a condom on the stick of bologna, and one of the guys went down on it. And the doctor said, "Well, I'd like to go home too, fellas."